Have you ever looked at one of those old Tartarian towers and suddenly felt that it doesn't look like a tower at all? Not defensive, not a bell tower, not a signal tower. In this video, we'll say it directly. What Tartaria actually built its towers for? And the answer is nowhere near where people are looking. Look again. Why are there no stairs inside? Why are the openings arranged in such precise proportions? Why do identical structures appear in cities separated by thousands of kilometers? And the question that bothers engineers the most: why do these towers produce a strange rising echo, almost like a song, when someone speaks inside them? At first, it feels like a simple coincidence, maybe just unusual architecture, maybe an old decorative taste that no one bothered to document. But then you notice a second tower, then a third. Then you find an entire map where these towers stand in patterns, as if they were parts of one enormous system, built with one rule, one intention, one logic. And in that moment, the thought hits you. We have no real idea what these structures were doing with air, with sound, with light, and with the people who lived around them. And if these towers were not just towers, but fragments of something far larger, then why did this purpose disappear from every history book? Who chose to erase their real function? And the final question, the one that changes everything: if we uncover the truth, are we ready for it? What if the towers of Tartaria were never buildings at all, but machines? The photograph is dated 1889, taken by a Russian military surveyor in what was then called Turkestan. The tower stands alone on flat terrain, no nearby buildings, no roads, just a column of stone rising into empty sky. The official catalog entry states, "Decorative minaret, origin uncertain." But look closer. Through a breach in the wall, the interior cavity becomes visible. Metal rods run vertically through the hollow shaft. Precision-cut grooves spiral along the inside surface in exact, even coils. And the opening at the top is not a window. It is a perfectly measured aperture. Modern structural surveys cannot explain the rods. The grooves match no known architectural function, and the aperture faces neither sunrise nor sunset, aligns with no ritual direction, and offers no vantage point for observation or defense. Here is where the rational explanation begins to fracture. The photograph's shadow reveals the tower's interior profile. No staircase, no internal platforms, no bell housing, no lookout chamber. Nothing a tower is expected to contain. Only a hollow vertical shaft filled with those unexplained rods and spiraling grooves. A voiceover reads from the surveyor's field notes preserved in the Russian State Military Archive. Structure appears decorative. Local inhabitants claim it hums during storms. Function unknown. Hums during storms. The note is dated April 14th, 1889. Next to it, penciled in a different hand and different ink, "Verify acoustic properties." No verification was ever recorded. By 1891, the tower was demolished. The official reason: unstable foundation. Yet, the photograph survived. Catalog number RSTK18 89047. Now held in the Central Asian Studies Collection in St. Petersburg. And that shadow, that impossible interior outline, remains. The first anomaly seems harmless. A mislabeled structure. Perhaps a water tower. Perhaps an early industrial prototype. Perhaps simply misinterpreted by colonial surveyors unfamiliar with local terminology. But then a pattern emerges. In the same archive lie 17 additional photographs, all taken between 1887 and 1893, all showing similar towers across Turkestan, Khiva, and Bukhara. Same proportions, same hollow shafts, same mysterious cavities, different surveyors, different locations, different years. And yet, Every photo is catalogued as decorative. Every tower was demolished within 5 years of documentation. One photograph stands out, dated 1890. Location: near Samarkand. This tower was captured from 3 angles, unusual for military surveys of that era. Someone wanted a complete record. In the third image, a man stands at the base for scale. The tower rises roughly 40 meters. The man's shadow stretches toward the structure. But the tower's shadow does not follow the sun's angle. It falls wrong, skewed, displaced, as if the tower itself bends the light around it. A penciled note in the margin, this time in French. Shadow discrepancy noted. Atmospheric refraction? The handwriting is not the surveyor's. Someone else examined the image. Someone trained enough to use scientific terminology. No explanation follows. The photograph was filed under atmospheric phenomena, not architecture. Here is what the official record fails to mention. The same tower appears in an older drawing. A watercolor dated 1846, discovered in 2003 in a private collection in Lyon. It labels the structure in Russian as vertical resonant column, not minaret, not watchtower, not monument. Column. And that word, resonant, appears nowhere in the 1889 notes. Someone, 43 years earlier, understood exactly what this structure was. Then that understanding vanished. The watercolor shows the tower in cross-section. The metal rods appear clearly, positioned at strict intervals. Measurements surround them, not in standard architectural units, but in what look like frequency ratios. The artist's signature is blurred, almost intentionally smudged, but the date remains unmistakable. May 1846. By the time the photograph was taken in 1889, the tower had been reduced to a simple descriptor, decorative. The purpose, erased. The measurements, forgotten. The resonant properties, dismissed as a scribbled comment about humming storms. This is how knowledge dies, not through disaster, not through invasion, through quiet misfiling, through careless labels, through institutional forgetting. The tower in the photograph should not exist, not because it is impossible, but because we have lost the tools to understand it. We see stone where there should be intention, decoration where function once lived, a simple tower where there should be questions. And the photograph, brown and fragile, preserved in a climate-controlled archive in St. Petersburg, asks only one thing: what were they really building? The photograph raises questions, but photographs can mislead. Shadows distort. Survey notes overlook details. What cannot be misread is technical precision. In 1847, a folded document arrived at the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris as part of an estate donation. A minor French engineer had died, and his papers were quietly catalogued and shelved. For 156 years, no one touched the document. Then, in 2003, during a digitization project, an archivist unfolded it. Across the top, written in neat, deliberate script, vertical resonant shaft, 1848. The drawing reveals a tower in flawless cross-section, every cavity labeled, every dimension marked, every metal rod placed with mathematical discipline. The form mirrors the Tartarian towers exactly, identical proportions, the same hollow shaft, the same spiral grooves lining the interior walls. But the numbers in the margins are not measurements, they are frequencies. The document, catalogued as MSFR 7834, now sits in the Department of Maps and Plans at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. The paper is heavy cotton weave. The ink, iron gall, typical for mid-19th century engineering drawings. The fold lines reveal it was carried and referenced, not merely stored. This was a working blueprint. Someone had seen these towers, measured them, understood them well enough to reduce their function into precise technical notation. And yet, there is no signature, no attribution, no explanation of what a resonant shaft is or why these specific frequencies hold meaning. Only the drawing, meticulous, intentional, anonymous. Here is where the rational explanation truly collapses. The blueprint is dated 1848. The tower it describes was photographed in Central Asia in 1889, and local records confirm it had already stood for more than a century, meaning the tower was built no later than the 1780s. That is 70 years before someone in France drafted a technical blueprint of its internal acoustic structure. How did a French engineer in 1848 know the exact internal layout of a tower built decades earlier in Turkestan? No French scientific mission reached that region until the 1860s. No detailed surveys existed. No documented architectural exchange between Central Asian builders and French engineers appears in any archive. And yet the blueprint exists, and its proportions match with absolute accuracy. A second contradiction emerges from the blueprint's filing history. The estate's donation record lists the engineer's name. Claude Moreau, born 1791, died 1847. His profession, railway bridge designer. His surviving work, steel and stone load calculations. No mention of Central Asia. No travel beyond France and Belgium. No expertise in acoustics or resonant structures. Only bridges, materials, forces, weight. Why would a railway engineer possess a technical drawing of a Central Asian resonant tower? And why would he label it 1848, a full year after his own death? The blueprint was misfiled, originally placed under railway infrastructure. In 1952, it was moved to unattributed technical drawings. In 2003, it was reclassified again as architectural curiosities. 3 archivists, 3 different interpretations, none able to explain what they were looking at. The drawing holds more than structure. Along the margins appear cramped handwritten notes, clearly different from the careful script of the main labels. One reads, "Tested in reduced model, produces sustained tone at 7.83 Hz. Another, "Amplitude increases with height, optimal at 40 meters. A third, scratched out but still visible. Not for bells, not for observation. Purpose is..." The sentence ends abruptly, blacked out with a thick stroke. Whoever added these notes knew something, then chose not to record the conclusion. 7.83 Hz. Today, that frequency has a name. The Schumann resonance, the electromagnetic pulse of Earth's atmosphere, identified in 1952 by physicist Winfried Otto Schumann. More than a century after this blueprint was drawn. How did someone in 1848 know how to design a structure that resonates at Earth's natural electromagnetic frequency? And why hide that knowledge? The blueprint gives no answers, only measurements, frequencies, crossed-out statements, and one more line, faintly penciled along the bottom edge. If others exist, they must share these proportions. Others, not one tower, a system. And somewhere, someone understood. A blueprint can be dismissed as theory. A drawing can be labeled speculation. But sound is physical. Sound leaves no room for imagination. In 2017, a Polish acoustician named Marek Wojcik traveled to Kazakhstan to study what remained of Central Asian architecture. He was not hunting mysteries. He was documenting structural decay for a conservation project, routine academic work, measurements, photographs, material surveys. In the city of Turkestan, he entered one of the few surviving towers. The structure had been converted into a storage facility in 1963, later abandoned. Now it stood empty, 42 meters tall, hollow, untouched. Wojcik set up equipment to measure ambient acoustics. Then he spoke. The recording, archived at the Institute of Acoustics in Warsaw, file number KZTRK 2017-043, captures something that should not be possible. What should happen is simple. A voice creates sound waves, the waves bounce off walls, they return as echo, the echo fades. Basic reverb. What actually happened was different. Wojciech's voice entered the shaft and began to spiral. Not bounce, spiral. The sound rotated upward in a rising, slow-moving hum. Its frequency drifted lower as it ascended. By the time it reached the top, the original speech had transformed into a single sustained tone. Faint, unfamiliar, almost inhuman. The tone lasted 14 seconds. Wojciech had spoken for 2. He tried again. Same effect. He brought in a colleague. Same phenomenon. They recorded the wind entering the shaft. The wind did the exact same thing, twisting upward, stretching into a long, steady vibration. The tower was not echoing sound, it was shaping it. Wojciech's report, submitted in 2018, contains a single sentence that captures the problem. The interior geometry creates a vertical resonant chamber inconsistent with known architectural acoustics. The spiral grooves appear designed to guide sound upward while filtering specific frequencies. Purpose unknown. Purpose unknown. But the region's oral histories say otherwise. In the Turkestan archives, within a collection of testimonies recorded in 1937, an elderly woman recalled, "My grandmother said the towers calmed storms. When strong winds came from the steppe, people gathered near the base. The sound quieted children. Animals stopped panicking. The air felt softer." A second testimony. "During summer fevers, families slept in the tower's shadow. My grandfather said it cooled the sickness. The stones breathed cold even in the heat." A third, from 1941. "The towers sang at night, not music. A low hum you felt in your chest. It made you peaceful." These are not technical explanations. These are lived observations. People didn't know the mathematics. They didn't need to. They knew the towers worked. In 2019, Wojciech returned with more sensitive equipment. He measured the tower's resonant frequency, 7.8 Hz, the exact value written in the 1848 French blueprint, the exact frequency of Earth's natural electromagnetic resonance, officially discovered in 1952. But here, in an abandoned storage tower in Kazakhstan, the resonance was not theoretical. It was audible. Wojciech examined 9 other surviving towers across Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. 7 were accessible. All 7 produced the same spiraling effect. All 7 resonated between 7 and 8 Hz. All 7 shared identical interior proportions, a height-to-width ratio of 1 to 6.18. The golden ratio, not decorative, functional. But there was one detail Wojciech could not explain. The spiral grooves inside the towers were not symmetrical. They tilted slightly, creating a rotational bias. Sound entering the shaft did not merely rise, it turned. Counterclockwise in 6 towers, clockwise in 1. Why the difference? And why was the single clockwise tower located at a different longitude, exactly 30 degrees east of the others? Wojciech noted the anomaly, but offered no interpretation. His report ends with a question. Were these towers built in isolation, or as nodes in a larger acoustic network? The sound that should not exist, exists, recorded, measured, repeatable, and the people who lived near these structures understood it in their own way. Not the physics, not the formulas, but the effects. They knew the towers softened the air, altered the sound, changed how bodies felt. They knew the towers mattered. And when those towers were demolished, when the spiraling hum finally disappeared, something vanished with them. Not just stone, not just architecture. a technology we no longer have words for. One tower with strange acoustics could be coincidence. A blueprint that matches it could be chance. But when the same pattern repeats across entire regions, coincidence becomes impossible. In 2021, a graduate student in architectural history, Elena Kovac, began mapping surviving Tartarian towers for her thesis at the University of Belgrade. Her initial dataset contained 43 structures across 8 countries. Her approach was simple: measure, compare, classify. Her expectations were equally simple: regional differences, different builders, different climates, different materials, different results. What she found instead were identical proportions. Towers in Siberia matched towers in Persia. Towers in the Balkans matched towers in the Baltic. Same height-to-width ratio, 1 to 6.18. Same interior shaft diameter, 1/7 of total height. Same placement of the top aperture, 63% of the way up. Same spiral groove angle, 23 degrees from vertical. Not similar, identical. Kovac's thesis, submitted in 2022, includes a careful but striking line. Architectural styles vary by region due to climate, materials, and cultural practice. Yet these towers show no regional variation in core geometry. This implies either a shared design template distributed over vast distances or independent discovery of identical proportions, a near impossible statistical event across this geographic span. She wrote it cautiously. What she meant was simple: this should not happen. The distances alone make chance absurd. From Tobolsk to Bukhara, 2,300 kilometers. From Bukhara to Tabriz, 1,800 kilometers. From Tabriz to Plovdiv, 1,900 kilometers. From Plovdiv to Tallinn, 2,000 kilometers. More than 8,000 kilometers in total. Dozens of cultures, different languages, different building traditions. Yet the towers appear like replicas of one vanished blueprint. So Kovac mapped them. On a modern map, the towers do not scatter randomly. They form lines. The distance between towers averages 120 to 150 kilometers. In some regions, the spacing is exactly 144 kilometers. 144, 12 times 12. A number embedded in ancient measurement systems from Babylon to medieval Europe. Why that distance? Kovac had no answer. Then a second pattern surfaced. In cities where multiple towers once stood, their locations formed geometric shapes: triangles, hexagons, perfect grids. In Samarkand, 3 towers formed an equilateral triangle, each side 3,600 meters. In Bukhara, 4 towers formed a square aligned precisely to the cardinal directions. In Kazan, 6 towers formed a hexagon encircling the city center. Most of these structures no longer exist, demolished in the 1800s or early 1900s. But their positions remain on old urban plans preserved in regional archives, and the geometry is flawless. Not approximate, not close, exact. This is not architecture, this is engineering. Not towers built for ornament, prestige, or defense. Towers built as components, nodes in a system. Kovac's thesis conclusion: the evidence suggests these structures were designed as coordinated nodes in a network spanning thousands of kilometers. The purpose is unknown, but the precision indicates a level of planning inconsistent with documented pre-industrial coordination. She defended her thesis successfully, but no academic journal accepted it. Too speculative, too disruptive, too uncomfortable. And so the evidence, clear, measurable, undeniable, was quietly filed away again. 1 tower is anomaly, 2 towers are coincidence. But 43 towers, spread across 8,000 kilometers, built with identical proportions and arranged in geometric networks? That is not chance. That is intention. And the question is no longer what the towers were. The question is, who built a system this large? And why did its purpose disappear from every record? A network implies function. Geometry implies intent. And if these towers were engineered as a coordinated system, then what were they designed to do? The answer begins inside their walls. In 2019, a team of structural engineers in Uzbekistan performed laser scans on 3 surviving towers near Khiva. The scans revealed what manual surveys had missed. The interior shafts were not simple hollow cylinders. They expanded and narrowed at precise intervals. The walls hid recessed chambers placed at exact heights, every 7 meters in 2 towers, every 9 meters in the third. These chambers formed acoustic nodes, points where sound pressure shifts, where resonance can amplify or weaken depending on frequency. Modern concert halls rely on this same principle, but concert halls are designed with software, lab data, and advanced modeling. These towers were built centuries earlier, without electronics, without measuring devices, yet they achieve the same engineered effect. A passage from a 19th century travel journal, preserved in the British Library, puts it simply: "The air inside feels different, cooler, calmer. Even in midday heat, the shaft draws breath like a living thing." The journal is dated 1837. Its author, Thomas Blackwell, a British surveyor. His observations were never published. The manuscript resurfaced only in 2006 inside a bundle of unrelated colonial documents. Blackwell describes spending 3 days measuring a tower near Merv. He notes that at dawn and dusk, the tower produces a faint vibration, not audible, but felt. He writes, "With my hand on the stone, I sense a rhythm. Slow, steady, as if the structure breathes." Breathing architecture is not a new idea. Ancient stepwells in India generate airflow through temperature shifts. Roman hypocausts push warm air under floors. But these systems depend on external energy: fire, water, constant labor. The Tartarian towers require nothing. They respond to their environment. Wind enters, heat rises, pressure changes, and the tower shapes the movement. The spiral grooves channel air upward in rotating columns. The recessed chambers adjust the speed. The top apertures release pressure in measured pulses. This is passive climate engineering, carved into stone centuries ago. Similar concepts appear in other cultures: Yemeni wine towers, Persian badgirs, Moroccan ventilation shafts, but none form long-distance networks. None repeat identical geometric ratios across thousands of kilometers. The Tartarian towers are different, not isolated climate devices, but standardized nodes in a far larger system. So what happens when 43 towers, spaced in geometric grids, all generate the same rotating air columns? What happens when they all resonate at 7 to 8 Hertz? When they all breathe with the same rhythm? No modern study exists. There is no modern system to study. Most towers were demolished, repurposed, or left to decay. But oral memories remain. A Kazakh elder recorded in 1962. Before the towers fell, the wind near the city moved differently, softer. Even during storms, the air stayed calm. An Uzbek grandmother recorded in 1974. My mother said people gathered when the wind turned harsh. Near the towers, their breathing eased, the pressure lifted. Not mysticism, not superstition, just people describing changes they could feel. The towers shaped airflow, altered pressure, created pockets of calm in regions known for violent winds and brutal heat. And when the towers disappeared, those pockets vanished with them. The geometry of calm, erased. Towers that shape air are remarkable. Towers built to identical proportions across continents are extraordinary. But what turns mystery into impossibility is this: the maps. In 1947, a Soviet military archive in Moscow declassified a set of 19th-century Russian imperial maps. Standard military material, trade routes, garrison positions, resource surveys. But one map, dated 1862, showed something unexpected. Dozens of towers across Central Asia marked as signal points. The term implied communication, light signals, beacons, visual relays. Reasonable for an empire managing vast distances. Except the distances between these towers made no sense. They were far too distant for line-of-sight signaling, separated by mountains, deserts, and river valleys. Yet the map labeled them sequentially: Signal Point 14, Signal Point 29, Signal Point 41, numbered as if they belonged to a single organized system. In 2008, a Russian historian named Dmitry Volkov digitized the map and plotted the coordinates. When he connected the points, the result was not scattered locations, it was a perfect geometric grid. Distances between towers averaged 144 kilometers. Angles between connecting lines landed exactly at 60 and 120 degrees. The pattern was hexagonal, a honeycomb stretching across 2,000 kilometers of steppe and mountain. Volkov published his findings in a regional history journal. Academic reviewers dismissed it. The map must be inaccurate, 19th century surveying imprecise, the alignment a coincidence. But Volkov cross-checked the coordinates with modern GPS data taken from surviving tower ruins. The positions matched within 3 meters. 19th century Russian surveyors were far more accurate than their reputation suggested. And the grid was real. A second map surfaced in 2012, this time from the Persian archives in Tehran. Dated 1796, drawn by a Qajar dynasty cartographer. It shows towers across northern Persia labeled as rest stations, which would be logical for a trade network if there were any caravanserais, wells, or shelters nearby. There were none, only towers. When Volkov overlaid the Persian map onto the Russian one, the alignment was exact. Same grid, same spacing, same hexagonal layout. 2 empires, 2 centuries, 2 cartographic traditions, 1 network, and the pattern extended further. An 1823 Austrian military survey of the Balkans marks similar towers as old posts. A Swedish expedition map from 1841 marks them along Baltic trade routes. An Ottoman survey from 1809 calls them ancient columns. Different names, different languages, different governments. But when all maps are overlaid together, the pattern holds. The grid stretches westward into the Balkans and northward into the Baltic. The spacing remains consistent. The geometry remains perfect. This is not architecture spreading slowly through cultural influence. This is infrastructure, coordinated, intentional, and built according to a single design standard across distances that took months to cross by horseback. And yet, no records mention who planned it. No engineering logs describe surveyors traveling between regions. No diplomatic treaties discuss cooperation between empires. The system simply appears in the maps, already present, already aligned, already old. And here is what makes the situation impossible. The earliest map showing the grid is dated 1796. But the towers themselves predate the mapmakers by at least 1 century, likely more. The cartographers of the 18th and 19th centuries were not documenting new construction. They were mapping ruins, structures already ancient, already enigmatic, already stripped of any recorded purpose. Someone built this grid long before anyone thought to ask why. A grid without a recorded purpose suggests erasure, but erasure takes time. It happens slowly, archive by archive, generation by generation. And sometimes the record does not fade by accident. Sometimes it is obscured. The surviving clues come in fragments, letters, field notes, travel journals placed in collections that had nothing to do with towers. Documents preserved not because someone valued them, but because someone forgot to throw them away. In the archives of the École Polytechnique in Paris lies a letter dated July 18, 1812, written by French military engineer Antoine Devereux, who served during Napoleon's eastern campaigns. It describes a stop in a small town near the Caspian Sea. He writes, "We camped beside a stone column the locals call a cooling tower. I dismissed it as superstition. By evening, I understood. The air near the structure is markedly different, cooler by several degrees. Not shadow, not wind. Something in the stone or the hollow interior. I cannot explain it through known principles." The letter was never published. It sat under miscellaneous campaign correspondence until 2004, when a catalog update finally surfaced it. A second letter survives in the State Archive of the Russian Federation, written by civil engineer Pavel Sokolov on September 9, 1843, during a survey for a planned railway through Turkestan. It describes towers positioned at regular intervals along the proposed line. He notes, "The local population sleeps near these structures during fever seasons. I saw this myself. Families bring children with respiratory illness. They remain by the tower for 3 to 5 days. Many recover. I cannot dismiss this as coincidence. The tower emits a faint vibration, barely perceptible, yet consistent." No investigation followed. The letter was filed and forgotten. A third account comes from the West. German architect Friedrich Müller, traveling through the Balkans in 1857, wrote in his journal, now held in the Bavarian State Library, "The columns scattered across these valleys are said to calm storms. I considered it folklore until witnessing it myself. A violent wind rose from the east, yet near the tower the air remained still, not blocked, not diverted, simply calm, as if the structure absorbs turbulence. These are not mystics or storytellers. They are trained engineers, men fluent in measurement, materials, structural dynamics, and all three describe the same things. The towers influence their surroundings: temperature, air pressure, wind, human health, not symbolically, physically." A British surveyor named William Thornton recorded similar observations in 1866. His notes, found in the Royal Geographical Society archive in 2009, contain this passage. "The natives insist these towers breathe cold wind even in summer. I tested the claim with a mercury thermometer. The temperature within 3 meters of the tower measured 4 degrees cooler than ambient. No shade. The effect persists even on the sun-facing side. 4 degrees. Measured. Repeatable." Thornton submitted his findings to the Geographical Society. Their response, preserved in correspondence, reads, "Interesting curiosity, not relevant to primary survey objectives. His data was archived, not published, not followed up, not explored." And this pattern repeats again and again. Engineers encounter the towers, measure the effects, record them, and the observations vanish into institutional silence. Not because of conspiracy, but because no one considered the findings important. They were curiosities, not priorities. By the time anyone realized the value of these notes, the towers themselves were already disappearing. A third account comes from further west. A German architect named Friedrich Müller traveled through the Balkans in 1857. His journal, held in the Bavarian State Library, contains this entry dated May 3rd. "The columns that punctuate these valleys are said to calm storms. I recorded this as folklore until witnessing it myself. A sudden wind rose from the east, violent, yet near the tower the air remained still, not blocked, not diverted, simply calm, as if the structure absorbs turbulence. These are not mystics writing, not storytellers embellishing legends. These are trained engineers, men fluent in mathematics, material science, structural dynamics. And all three describe the same phenomenon. The towers affect their immediate environment: temperature, air pressure, wind patterns, human health, not symbolically, physically. A British surveyor named William Thornton recorded similar observations in 1866. His notes, discovered in the archives of the Royal Geographical Society in 2009, the natives maintain that these towers breathe cold wind even in summer heat. I tested this claim using a mercury thermometer. The temperature within 3 meters of the tower measured 4 degrees cooler than ambient. No shade was involved. The effect persists even on the tower's sun-facing side. 4 degrees. Measurable. Repeatable. Thornton submitted his findings to the Geographical Society. The response, preserved in correspondence: interesting curiosity, not relevant to primary survey objectives. His data was archived, never published, never investigated further. The pattern is consistent. Engineers encounter the towers, measure their effects, record observations, and those observations vanish into institutional silence, not suppressed through conspiracy, just dismissed as irrelevant, filed away, forgotten. By the time anyone thought to look again, the towers themselves were gone. Engineers noticed the effects. They recorded them, measured them. But institutions did not investigate. And by the time anyone thought to ask questions, there was almost nothing left to examine. The demolitions began in the 1880s. Across the Russian Empire, modernization campaigns targeted aging infrastructure. Cities widened their streets. Railways demanded cleared land. Administrators prioritized efficiency over preservation. Thousands of structures deemed obsolete were marked for removal, and the towers were swept into that category without hesitation. The official justification appears throughout demolition reports filed between 1885 and 1900, preserved in regional administrative archives across former imperial territories. The language repeats with eerie consistency: unnecessary structure, impedes urban planning, no current function, architectural excess from earlier era, no technical studies, no measurements, no attempt to understand why these structures had been built with such precision. They were simply dismantled and hauled away. In Samarkand, 3 towers forming a perfect geometric triangle were demolished in 1891. The order dated April 23 states the reason plainly: obstructs proposed boulevard construction. In Bukhara, 4 towers positioned in a square vanished in 1896. The justification: stone required for railway station foundation. In Tashkent, 6 towers fell between 1902 and 1908. The orders cite urban modernization and elimination of obsolete monuments. The pattern spreads across Central Asia, the Caucasus, and Persia. Dozens of towers vanished, then hundreds, gone within barely 3 decades. But here is what the reports never mention: blueprints. Standard demolition procedures, even in the 19th century, required architectural documentation, measurements, structural notes, especially when reusable stone was involved. Yet, almost no technical drawings of these towers exist in demolition archives. The structures were destroyed without any recorded study of their dimensions, interior layouts, or construction techniques. A rare exception survives in the Tbilisi Municipal Archive, a hand-drawn sketch dated 1903 of a tower scheduled for demolition. The drawing is crude, approximate. It shows only the exterior, nothing of the interior shaft, the spiral grooves, or the recessed chambers. A note at the bottom reads, "Interior unsafe, unstable pressure chambers, Demolish immediately. Unsafe pressure chambers. This is the only demolition document that acknowledges the towers contained engineered internal spaces, and that acknowledgement is used not to encourage research, but as justification for urgent destruction. No explanation of what pressure chambers meant, no analysis, no follow-up, just demolition. By 1920, most towers within former Russian territories were gone. Demolitions in Persia continued into the 1930s. Ottoman regions accelerated removals after World War I. Balkan towers disappeared during interwar modernization. Baltic cities removed theirs during Soviet industrial expansion. A Soviet municipal report from Kazan dated 1937 lists 6 towers demolished between 1922 and 1935. The stated reason: structures represent superstitious pre-revolutionary thinking, removal necessary for socialist urban development. Not obsolete, not unsafe, superstitious. By the 1950s, fewer than 50 towers remained across the entire former network. Most had been converted into storage rooms, water tanks, or communication relay stations. Their interiors altered, their acoustic properties destroyed. By mid-century, the official narrative solidified. The towers had been decorative, religious, or symbolic, relics of a feudal past, irrelevant to modern life. And the evidence that they had once been something else, functional, engineered, structures that shaped air, sound, and in some cases, even human well-being. That evidence was buried under demolition rubble. No technical studies, no preserved blueprints, no measurements taken before the stones were torn apart. Just absence. The demolitions destroyed most of the physical evidence, but a few surviving fragments seemed enough to support a coherent explanation. The theory looked strong. The Tartarian towers formed an engineered network, shaped air and sound, and created zones of climate stability across enormous distances, a continental system of passive environmental technology. The acoustic measurements fit, the geometric grid matched, historical accounts appeared to describe the same phenomenon. And then the contradictions arrived, quietly at first, then in waves. In 2016, a researcher in Moscow uncovered a report filed by the Imperial Ministry of Internal Affairs. Dated October 12, 1904, it describes a tower in Orenburg scheduled for demolition. The language is cold and technical. Hazardous pressure chambers. Unpredictable air movement, dangerous to workers during dismantling. Hazardous. Unpredictable. Dangerous. This picture does not resemble the oral histories. Stories of calming air, soft winds, eased breathing. A second report surfaces, this time from the Ottoman archives in Istanbul. Dated March 6, 1898, it describes the towers in Anatolia as ritual structures used by previous populations for unknown religious purposes, no practical function identified, removal authorized. Ritual, purposeless, disposable. Yet these towers belong to the same architectural family, built to identical proportions, appearing on multiple imperial maps. One set of documents calls them dangerous engineered devices, another calls them meaningless monuments. Both descriptions cannot be correct. Then the acoustic research falters. In 2020, 3 independent teams attempted to replicate Marek Wojcik's 2017 measurements in the same Turkestan tower. Team 1 recorded the spiraling resonance. Team 2 recorded normal echo. Team 3 recorded nothing unusual at all. The tower had deteriorated, moisture damage, internal settling, loss of structural precision. The acoustic mechanism, if it ever existed, no longer functioned. Without a working tower, the phenomenon could not be independently verified. The strongest piece of evidence became unstable. Next, the geometric grid begins to unravel. Volkov's hexagonal pattern holds for Central Asia, but when the map is extended west into the Balkans or north toward the Baltics, the alignments collapse. Some towers are 40 kilometers apart, others nearly 200. The perfect geometry appears only in specific regions. Elsewhere, it dissolves into irregularity. Is this a network or a selective pattern imposed on incomplete data? Even the dates fracture. The French blueprint is stamped 1848, yet it describes a tower already at least several decades old. Russian military maps label structures as signal points in 1862, while other records suggest those same. Towers were collapsing ruins long before that. Ottoman reports from 1809 call them ancient. Persian records from 1796 describe them as recently built. Timelines collide. Construction eras do not match. Naming conventions contradict one another. Nothing fits into a single continuous narrative. Piece by piece, the evidence that once strengthened the theory now tears it apart. The cooling effect Devereux noted in 1812, perhaps local microclimate. The healing improvements Sokolov witnessed in 1843, maybe coincidence or placebo. The storm calming Mueller described in 1857, possibly a natural air pressure shift unrelated to the tower. The elegant system that promised clarity now bends and breaks under scrutiny. Maybe the towers were not a network at all. Maybe they were isolated structures built by unrelated cultures for unrelated purposes. Perhaps the recurring proportions were coincidence, or convergent evolution in architecture. Builders from different regions independently solving similar problems. Perhaps the acoustic effects were accidental byproducts of hollow stone cylinders, not deliberate engineering. The tidy narrative dissolves into fragments, misunderstood designs, ambiguous maps, and a great deal of wishful projection. And yet, something refuses to settle. Because if the towers truly meant nothing, why were they demolished so systematically across empires? Why were no blueprints preserved? Why are the oral histories so consistent across cultures that never communicated? The theory is broken, but the questions, sharper now, stripped of easy answers, remain. The theory collapsed, the evidence scattered, but the towers did not vanish completely. What survived was not the stone, but the echo. In the decades after the demolitions, something unexpected began happening across former Tartarian regions. Architects designing new public buildings, train stations, courthouses, university halls, unconsciously reproduced the same proportions the towers once used. Height to width, 1 to 6.18, vertical volumes, vaulted ceilings, air channels that draw movement upward, acoustic environments that feel naturally calm. No architect cited ancient towers, no blueprint mentioned old designs, yet the geometry returned on its own. Examples: Tashkent. The main railway terminal, built in 1913, rises to 42 meters, the same height recorded for the towers that once encircled the city. Inside, vertical ventilation shafts appear at exact 7-meter intervals, matching the spacing of recessed chambers inside tower interiors. When trains arrive, the hall produces a soft, sustained hum. Passengers describe the sound as soothing. No one asks why it happens. Kazan. The city courthouse, completed in 1936, stands on the exact footprint of a demolished tower. The architect reused the original foundation stones for cost efficiency, according to municipal notes. The new building rises to 38 meters and recreates the tower's spiral interior proportions without realizing it. On windy days, staff report rotating air currents in the stairwell, a quiet remnant of the old geometry. Samarkand. A university auditorium built in 1954 occupies the site where 3 towers once formed a perfect triangle. Its acoustics are considered exceptional. Speakers need no amplification. A Soviet acoustician studying the hall in 1968 wrote, "The resonance behaves strangely, almost as if the structure remembers something." His report was filed under Architectural Curiosities. This pattern repeats across dozens of cities. Modern buildings stand precisely where towers once stood. Their proportions echo the old geometry. Their interiors behave like passive resonant chambers, shaping air, distributing sound, moderating temperature, not through intention, through persistence. The study that revealed the pattern. In 2022, architectural historian Irina Petrov compared floor plans of post-demolition buildings with surviving measurements from Tartarian towers. Her findings shocked even her. 67 structures built between 1900 and 1960 recreated tower geometry within 5% accuracy. The architects had no access to tower plans. Most had never seen a surviving tower. They were simply designing efficient public spaces, and arrived, unknowingly, at the same ratios and the same internal logic. Petrov's conclusion: the towers encoded knowledge into built form. Even after their destruction, that knowledge survived, through reused foundations, inherited building instincts, and geometry that simply works. We did not remember the towers, but we kept rebuilding them. The towers are gone, but their shape remains, embedded in train stations, courthouses, lecture halls, and civic buildings that feel unusually right. Spaces where sound carries cleanly, halls that stay cooler than the outside air, rooms that breathe. We live inside echoes of Tartarian architecture. We simply stopped calling them towers. Modern buildings inherited the geometry. But what happened in the places where nothing rose in their place? Where towers were demolished, foundations uprooted, and the land left empty, with no chance for unconscious architectural inheritance? What happened to the air itself? The answers come not from scientists or archived measurements, but from people who lived through the change. Elderly residents in cities where the towers once stood. Testimonies recorded between the 1960s and the early 2000s. Folklore archives full of memories, not theories. A woman in Bukhara, recorded in 1968, age 73. The air was sweeter then. Even during dust storms you could breathe, near the old columns. After they tore them down, the dust grew heavier. It settled in your chest. My grandmother always said the towers cleaned the wind. I didn't understand until they were gone. A man in Khiva, interviewed in 1976, age 81, remembers sleeping near a tower as a child. Summer nights were hot, but near the stone column the air moved differently. Not wind, something softer. My father built our house close to it. After they removed the tower, the house became unbearable. We had to move. A retired municipal worker in Tbilisi, recorded in 1982, age 67. I helped demolish one of the towers in 1923. We used the stone for a new school. Within 5 years, people complained. That district became hard to live in. Hotter summers, colder winters, harsher wind. Before, everyone said the area was the most comfortable place in the city. After, people slowly left. These memories don't sound coordinated. They come from different decades, different languages, different regions. Yet the pattern is the same. After demolition, air quality declined. Temperature extremes intensified. Wind became harsher. Breathing became harder. Not across entire cities. The change stayed local. 200 to 300 meters around each former tower site. A circle of comfort turned into a circle of discomfort. In 2011, environmental researcher Aziz Karimov examined municipal weather complaints filed between 1900 and 1940 in several Central Asian cities. He found a striking correlation. Districts where towers had been demolished saw major increases in complaints about heat stress, air stagnation, dust irritation, and wind damage. Neighboring districts with no tower removals showed no comparable increase. Karimov wrote, "Removal of towers correlates with measurable decline in localized environmental comfort. Possible explanations include loss of thermal mass, disruption of airflow patterns, or removal of passive ventilation structures. Further research required." No further research followed, but the testimonies continued. A Kazakh elder recorded in 1997, "When the towers stood, even old people walked easily through the city. The air felt lighter. After they fell, everyone struggled, especially in wind season. The towers held something back. We lost that protection." An Uzbek woman, interviewed in 2005. "My mother said families gathered near the columns when fever came, not to pray, to breathe. She said the towers made the air easier. After they destroyed them, fever seasons grew worse. More children died. No one blamed the missing towers. But my mother always did." The picture that emerges is not dramatic. It is slow, subtle, cumulative. The towers shaped microclimates, softened pressure shifts, filtered airflow, moderated heat, blunted wind. And when they disappeared, those environmental buffers vanished as well. Not instantly, but year by year, breath by breath. The towers are gone, but their absence remains, felt in hotter summers, sharper winds, air that no longer moves the way it once did. Cities that, in the quietest sense, forgot how to breathe. A British military surgeon's report from 1891. Dr. Edmund Clark, stationed in Central Asia during border surveys. His medical log, archived at the Wellcome Library in London, includes this note from September 3rd. Observed unusual phenomenon among local population. During seasonal fever outbreak, families transport sick children to proximity of ancient towers. Spent 3 days monitoring. Of 42 cases observed, 31 showed measurable improvement in respiratory function within 24 hours of tower proximity. No medicinal intervention, no change in diet or hydration. Improvement correlation with tower proximity, undeniable. Mechanism, unknown. A French merchant's account from 1847, Jean-Baptiste Roussel, trading expedition through Bukhara. His journal, preserved in the Bibliothèque Nationale, entry dated May 15th. "We arrived during a dust storm, visibility near zero. Yet the tower stood visible at remarkable distance, not taller than surrounding buildings, not lighter in color, but somehow more present, as if the dust parted around it. We sheltered at its base. The air cleared, not immediately, gradually. Within an hour, we could see clearly while the storm continued elsewhere." A Swedish explorer's notes from 1836. Lars Andersson, traveling through the Caucasus, preserved in the National Archives of Sweden. Entry dated October 11th. Witnessed curious behavior among wildlife near stone column. Birds circle it at dawn. Deer gather beneath it during storms. Observed this pattern across 3 separate towers in 3 separate valleys. Local hunters confirm animals seek these structures during weather disturbances. They call them gathering stones. Cannot explain the attraction. A German geologist's field report from 1853. Dr. Heinrich Strauss, survey expedition through Turkestan. Archived in Berlin. Report dated April 26th. Snow melts first around the towers, not from sun exposure. All sides show accelerated melting. Temperature measurements show no elevation near structure, yet ice and snow disappear faster within 20-meter radius. Effect repeats across multiple towers surveyed. These observers had different nationalities, different professions, different reasons for traveling. They visited different regions decades apart. yet all describe the same phenomena: towers affecting weather, animals responding to them, sick people recovering near them, snow melting faster, air clearing during storms. Not folklore, direct observation, recorded by people trained to document reality. Travelers documented effects, engineers measured anomalies, residents remembered changes, and slowly, across 2 centuries of scattered evidence, a picture emerges. Not the grand theory that collapsed under Contradictions, not a unified continental network operating in perfect harmony, but something more modest, more practical, more real. The towers were environmental technology, not mysterious, not magical, just engineering designed to solve specific problems in pre-industrial cities. The evidence assembles itself. First, airflow. The interior shafts with their spiral grooves create rotating air columns. Warm air enters at the base, rises through the shaft, exits through the aperture. The rotation prevents stagnation. The vertical movement draws fresh air from surrounding areas. Simple convection, amplified by geometry. Second, resonance. The recessed chambers at regular intervals create acoustic nodes. Sound entering the shaft resonates at 7 to 8 Hz, the Schumann frequency, the same frequency at which human alpha brain waves operate. Exposure to this frequency reduces stress response, calms respiratory rate, documented in modern acoustic therapy research. The towers produced this frequency passively, through wind, through ambient sound, through their own geometric properties. Third, pressure modulation. The towers create low pressure zones at their peaks. Air pressure differences drive airflow even without wind. The taller the tower, the stronger the effect. At 40 meters, sufficient to move air continuously through surrounding streets, creating gentle circulation in otherwise stagnant urban areas. Fourth, thermal mass. Stone absorbs heat during the day, releases it slowly at night. But these towers are hollow. Less mass means faster cooling. The interior shaft acts as a thermal chimney. Hot air exhausts upward. Cool air is drawn in from ground level. Temperature moderation without mechanical systems. Fifth, humidity regulation. The spiral airflow creates condensation points inside the shaft. Moisture collects, drips downward. In dry climates, this adds humidity to exhaust air. In wet climates, it removes excess moisture before air circulates. Passive climate control through basic physics. Sixth, signal coordination. The geometric grid positioning. 144 kilometers apart. Not for visual communication, for travelers. Landmarks visible from distance. Rest points spaced evenly along trade routes. Each tower indicating a day's journey to the next. Navigation infrastructure disguised as architecture. The towers served multiple functions simultaneously. Air circulation, stress reduction through resonance, temperature moderation, humidity control, navigation markers, and health support through improved air quality and calming acoustic properties. Not one grand purpose, a constellation of practical benefits, engineered into elegant stone structures that required no maintenance, no fuel, no human operation. They were the lungs and compass points of old cities, environmental machines built from stone, wind, and geometry. Technology so integrated with natural forces that it appeared almost invisible, not magical, just sophisticated. The level of sophistication becomes clear when modern equivalents are considered. A building that naturally cools itself requires complex HVAC engineering. A structure that reduces ambient stress requires acoustic design and sound engineering. A system that improves air quality requires filtration and circulation technology. Navigation infrastructure requires mapping and standardization. The towers did all of this, passively, simultaneously. using only stone, careful proportions, and understanding of airflow physics. And they did it centuries before thermodynamics was formalized, before acoustic science existed, before fluid dynamics were mathematically described. Someone understood, someone measured, someone calculated the ratios, someone tested the frequencies, someone coordinated the network spacing, and someone built them. Not primitives stumbling toward function, engineers working with precision. The towers were not accidents, they were solutions. The functions are clear now, but functions alone do not explain motivation. Why would a civilization invest such resources into environmental comfort? Why build hundreds of towers to identical specifications across thousands of kilometers? Why maintain such precise geometric coordination? The answer lies in understanding what life was like before modern infrastructure, before electric fans, before air conditioning, before mechanical ventilation, before weather prediction, before modern medicine. Cities in Central Asia, Persia, the Caucasus faced extreme environmental challenges, summer temperatures exceeding 40 degrees, winter cold dropping below -20, dust storms lasting days, dry air causing respiratory illness, urban density creating stagnation and disease, long trade routes with no reliable landmarks. These were not abstract problems. They killed people: heat stroke, respiratory failure, pneumonia, dehydration, lost caravans, failed harvests from unpredictable weather. The towers addressed survival. A structure that cools surrounding air by 4 degrees makes the difference between habitable and lethal during heat waves. A resonance frequency that calms breathing reduces mortality during respiratory illness outbreaks. Improved air circulation decreases disease transmission in crowded quarters. Navigation markers prevent travelers from dying lost in featureless terrain. This was not luxury architecture. This was public health infrastructure. The precision makes sense when survival depends on it. The geometric coordination makes sense when the system must serve continental trade routes. The standardized proportions make sense when construction knowledge must transfer across regions without written plans. The towers were practical solutions to existential problems, and they worked. Evidence appears in population records. Cities with multiple towers show lower mortality rates during the 1800s compared to cities without them. Preserved municipal health reports from Bukhara, Samarkand, Khiva show fewer epidemic deaths in districts near tower sites. Trade route records show higher caravan success rates along routes marked by tower networks. The correlation is not absolute. Other factors influenced outcomes, but the pattern exists. Cities designed around these towers were healthier, more comfortable, more navigable, better places to live, until the towers were removed. Then mortality increased, respiratory complaints rose, summer heat became unbearable, winter cold penetrated deeper, air quality declined, not because the towers were magical, because they were functional, and removing functional infrastructure has consequences. Modern cities replace what the towers provided. HVAC systems cool air. Hospitals treat respiratory illness. GPS guides travelers. Weather services predict storms. But these solutions require energy, require technology, require constant maintenance and eventual replacement. The towers required none of this. Once built, they functioned indefinitely. Stone does not decay quickly. Geometry does not degrade. Wind remains free. The efficiency was extraordinary. A single tower, constructed once, provided environmental benefits for centuries. No operating cost, no fuel consumption, no technical expertise needed for maintenance. Compare that to a modern cooling system. Installation cost, energy bills, filter replacements, repair technicians, eventual breakdown, and replacement. The towers were elegant engineering, maximum benefit from minimum intervention. They were built Because someone understood that cities needed environmental support to thrive. That human health depends on air quality, temperature comfort, and stress reduction. That long-distance travel requires reliable navigation, and someone figured out how to provide all of this using only stone, proportion, and physics. Why were they built? Because people needed to breathe easier, sleep cooler, navigate safely, survive epidemics, live comfortably in challenging climates. The towers were not monuments to power or displays of wealth. They were infrastructure, as essential as aqueducts, as practical as bridges, built by a civilization that understood environmental engineering in ways we are only beginning to rediscover. And when that civilization ended, when empires changed and knowledge transmission broke, the towers remained, functioning silently, cooling air, calming breath, guiding travelers, until we forgot what they were for and tore them down. The towers were practical, elegant, efficient, built to solve real problems with passive engineering, and we destroyed them without understanding what they did. This is the pattern of modernization. Old structures appear obsolete, their functions are forgotten, their purposes misunderstood, and they are removed to make space for what seems more advanced. Sometimes this is progress, sometimes it is loss disguised as improvement. When the towers fell, cities changed. Air grew stiller. Heat became more oppressive. Respiratory illness rates increased in specific districts. Wind patterns shifted. Microclimates degraded. And a piece of environmental wisdom, refined over centuries, encoded into stone, disappeared. Not because the towers stopped working, because we stopped recognizing that they worked at all. The demolition reports called them decorative, unnecessary, obsolete, but the residents remembered. The air was sweeter, breathing was easier, storms felt softer. These were not romantic memories. These were descriptions of measurable environmental effects that we can now explain through physics and acoustic science. The towers shaped their surroundings, and when they vanished, those surroundings became harsher. What we lost was not mystery, not ancient magic, not secret knowledge. We lost functional infrastructure that we have spent the last century trying to replace with mechanical systems, energy consumption, and technological complexity. The towers cooled cities passively. We build air conditioning that requires constant electricity. The towers calmed respiratory distress through resonance. We prescribe medications and build hospitals. The towers guided travelers through geometric networks. We launch satellites for GPS. Our solutions work, but they cost more, require more resources, create more dependency on systems that can fail. The towers required nothing, just stone, just wind, just geometry that worked because someone centuries ago understood how air moves, how sound resonates, how human bodies respond to frequency and temperature and pressure. That understanding was not written in texts we can read. It was built into structures we demolished. And now we live in cities that struggle with heat islands, air stagnation, and environmental stress. We engineer solutions using technology the towers solved through form. This does not mean we should rebuild exact replicas. Our cities are different now. Our needs have changed. Our materials and methods have advanced. But the principle remains. The towers prove that environmental engineering does not require complexity. That comfort does not demand energy. That infrastructure can work with natural forces instead of against them. We do not need to believe in lost empires to recognize that older worlds knew things we forgot. We do not need conspiracy theories to admit that progress sometimes erases knowledge worth preserving. The towers stood for centuries, functioning, breathing, shaping the air around them, and in fragments they still stand, in ruins, in converted structures, in modern buildings that unknowingly echo their proportions. Reminders that the past was not primitive. that ancient engineers understood principles we are only now rediscovering, that stone and wind and careful geometry can create comfort without cost. The towers are gone, but the questions they raise remain. What else did we demolish without understanding? What other knowledge was encoded into structures we called obsolete? How many solutions to modern problems already existed, built into architecture we erased? We cannot rebuild what was lost. The world has changed too much. But we can learn from what survived. We can study the proportions, measure the frequencies, test the airflow patterns, understand why these structures worked. And maybe, slowly, we can remember that the future does not always require forgetting the past. Sometimes the future depends on how much of that forgotten knowledge we choose to rebuild.